Recording. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our fourth meeting of the Duet residency. If you have noticed, our third meeting is missing from the YouTube channel. That's because it requires a little bit more editing, and I've been super busy. But for this one, we are here, and this one I decided to upload it directly just because it's on a Saturday now, and I hate being the weekends being dead. That was not correct English, but anyways, we'll go with it. um, I have with me today Kimberly and YEKTA. YEKTA artist was our artist for our artist talk last Thursday. So some people have gotten the chance to hear more about his work, but um, the Metakey crew, that's what we call them. The name is now Meta Crew. The Meta Crew has not heard from you guys in relation directly about the Duat residency from a while. So um, let's start off by saying, like, how's it going? I know, like, if work hasn't been produced, we to those listening, our show has been pushed to September, early September, so we have more time to work on our our one chosen work, or however many you choose. But how's it going?
Yeah, I have been kind of piecing things together. I still feel like I'm in more of a process and thinking through period, but
Mm,
painting for me is like 80% sitting and together and trying to make something happen in my brain, and then like 20% painting,
mm.
which is 100%. It adds up. But I've been taking a bit more time to piece things together. I chopped up a bunch of National Geographics from the 80s, and I just
Nice,
kind of, yeah, I have like a Charlie Day wall going on. And yeah, I'm still like practicing with oil and putting things together and seeing what comes up. It's been
nice.
really, it's been really good. I'm also working. Wish I could be doing this as a primary kind of thing, but that's not always the case, especially in the summertime. So,
Mm.
but yeah, I have more time coming up in the middle of August, so that'll be a nice kind of closing, I think, production period.
Nice. That's good to
Yeah.
hear. And Yekta, even though we talked literally 2 days ago, um, and you said you were painting then. Let me just ask, okay, yeah, how is the painting going?
It is going pretty well. I feel like, well, the last time we talked, I don't know if this was from the recorded section of the talk,
Mhm.
but you know how we talked about how much better you get just over such a short span of time when you
Mm.
do this thing just regularly, you know, when you're
Yeah.
consistent with it. And yeah, I'm noticing that I'm learning so much every single time I paint
Mm.
that it is just crazy. Like I compare what I'm working on right now is also a narrative figurative painting. It's a landscape. It's an
Mm.
oil painting. Um, and I compare that to the one I finished last October. The one you mentioned during the talk. The one with the rug motif
Mm.
as the path, and
The
there's the
journey.
figure. Yes, the hero's journey, the first one, and it's just crazy. I'm noticing that I'm just learning so much
Yeah, no, it's.
without not having to, without having to ask a professor. Now I feel like I've gotten to that
Mm-hmm.
It's.
level of you start teaching yourself in a
Mm.
sense just by doing, just by dabbling with the material. And
Yeah,
yeah.
seeing what happens.
And Kimberly, for you, I mean, I think just like from based on our like conversations back in the U Ottawa buildings, like you've you have a degree before this, right? And so
Yeah.
it's not like you're going through the path of, man, I'm gonna go to art school. I'm a high schooler. I'm learning to draw in my high school drawing classes. Boom, art
I did
school.
that too.
Well, but I mean, like, it's like there's a little break where
Oh,
that
definitely. Yeah.
the like the professors and the teachers are gone, right? And you have to develop your skill just
Yeah,
solely.
that was definitely a choice too. Like it was one of those moments where with what I and it had been a while. You're right.
Mm.
Like there was like a large gap between high school and me coming to Ottawa U, and I did do other school in between, and I started working in healthcare, uh, and then any free time that I had, I spent looking at art or
Mm.
like just reading or going to the gallery and like I would even just go by myself, and like, it just was so like, it just like, it's always been under my skin. Like, it was
Mm.
always one of those things that like, it never went away. I wanted to do it after high school, but it wasn't what I went through for. My parents had some sort of influence on that, and that's okay. And I do love like my career in healthcare, but it's actually made me
Mm.
appreciate my job in healthcare, and made me like, not so, appreciate's the wrong word, but it's also the right word, because it's not like I don't, but it's
Mm.
made me like feel more balanced in myself as a person
Mm.
by pursuing this and going through with it. And a big part of that was knowing that I wanted to learn from people who were in this sect of society, who, have gone to these lengths to do it. And we've been taught, all of us, by going
Mm.
to the same university by such people. It's been really rewarding. But a really nice part is not being, fresh out of high school, and like having to still kind of hustle and work on the side. And
Mm.
I take the time that I do get, or the time that I can carve out, and make this into a routine really seriously. And I think that this is such a, like, us having these talks is really important for that too. It's like, especially with the past year, and like having to adapt to being like online. I know
Mm.
Yekta and I both working from our homes, and like, and now we still are. And I think it just means a little bit more, because we've, it, in the best case scenario, that was how it was going to end up after school anyways, working in independently in experimental kind of practices, help you build on what's pulling you towards this,
Mm.
you know yeah, sorry, that was a lot of talking.
I don't know. That's
I'm
a
so glad I have the button down. Imagine.
no. That's a good answer. I mean, like, that's one of my biggest things now. It's I'm out of university and I'm like, well, damn, shit, fuck. What do I do? You know?
Sum it up. Damn.
Yeah, shit.
Fuck.
Uh, but I realize that it's like talking about art and is extremely helpful. Being around art is extremely helpful because as artists, even if we're not actively painting, we're thinking about painting, or if we're not actively drawing, we're thinking about
Mhm.
some sort of artistic process. And to go back to one of your original points, also that it's like what you said is you're taking some time to sit and think about the process and like process some of the stuff that you're gonna work on instead of just going directly to the painting. Like even that helps the work in such a way, right? Because you like we have paintings that take a lot of planning, a lot of studies. Man, I gotta get the color palette right. I gotta get my figures right. I gotta get my composition right. You know,
Mhm.
right, and then I have to plan my gesso, all that jazz, and then you have some works that can be that you can sit there and I mean like that's my own personal view is because we've had this argument so many times in art history classes with every version of art student ever to come on history, is quick work good, like, and it's like I really think that it's like if you've been thinking about a piece of a painting, for example, right, for a fucking month straight, and it comes down to a few abstract shapes that after this month you've managed to do it in like 5 minutes.
Mhm.
That 1 month of thinking is still valid enough to like legitimize the serious of this note of this work.
Yeah.
Be-
My
mm,
friend says that, because you can feel like it can sometimes feel really like shit. Like, you're like, oh fuck, I haven't produced anything
mm,
or whatever. That you can fall into that thinking. And I think that that's common, and that's what school is for, so that you can get those kind of like those self-esteem things out there, and like
mm,
learn that like you're painting in your head, because it's a thinking process for sure. Like, it doesn't matter if you haven't like picked up a brush. Like, if you're thinking, you're staying engaged with what it is that you're trying to do.
mm,
You're painting in your head. Part of it, I think, anyways. And that's the way that she put it, and I really think that's a nice way to think
and
about it.
and Yekta, how do you feel about that? Are you in
I feel like
agreement?
this came up the last time, like with during
Oh
the
yeah,
artist talk,
it did.
and I guess for me, I used to feel exactly this way you guys just described, but now I'm taking a much more
Mm,
the exact opposite approach. For
Yeah,
me,
you were saying that you just every day you're painting a little bit, like, or not even a little bit, but every day you're trying to like just keep going, just keep doing.
yeah,
Yeah.
I found that to be. Uh, Here's the thing:
Mm-hmm.
what we talked about with Tarek, with Anubis. Uh, this always happens. Sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah. Um, so we talked about how in especially in today's contemporary art world and the academia, we tend to at times over conceptualize, over analyze,
Mm.
over charge our works with socio-political connotations so that they can maybe even be more valid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
Um,
yeah.
Not that that is a bad thing. I'm not saying that, but I feel like I was almost falling into that pit of I was
Yeah.
sitting down and I was like, okay, I need to make work that is, I want to make work that is good.
Mm.
How do I make work that is good? And my first, especially the last 2 years, it was like, so I want to make work about these topics. And I would sit down, I would look up references, I would look up what image what the images I put down would mean. I would just, kind of intricately try and maybe
Mm.
uh, put something together that would just mean something sociopolitically, or just that would appear to be more intellectual in a sense.
Mm.
And I found that to be, like myself, for me at least, very detrimental because I felt like I was being somewhat of a fraud by doing that.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be a bit more immediate and urgent.
Mm.
So then I started just, what was I visually interested in? What happens when I just put these images together? I put down a sketch and I'm like, okay, I'm happy with this. Let me just turn this into a painting, see what happens. I just dish them all out as they come and just put images together, see what happens.
Yeah.
Put
Mm.
colors together, see what happens. And for me, that has been much more. It's worked much better. It doesn't mean,
It's doing what you want it to do. Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't mean I'm not also, thinking about my work's
Oh, of course, yeah.
socio-political
Yeah.
connotations.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I was saying to Anubis was that I much prefer it when that comes second, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. I put down the first the visual, the image. The image is like established. Then we talk about what that image does
Yeah.
sociopolitically instead of having sociopolitical goals and
Mm.
then making an image. If
There's
that makes
something.
sense.
Oh, totally. This reminds me of the whole concept of like going towards a painting and trying to basically like it's like a conceptual paint by number at that point,
Mm.
right? Like if you are coming at it with like I'm gonna I'm it's like taking an image and being like I'm gonna put this down here exactly as best as I can, and like basically just filling it in how you see it. You are putting a block on yourself for
Mm.
missing like how the paint goes down itself, rather than forcing it to do what you want it to do, to look like what you're holding in your hand or something. There's something that I think happens when you put paint down and um like just see what it does. And
Mm.
like I get that kind of immediate feeling, like, or like what you're saying about it being more urgent, or more responsive, almost like not just um, I have a plan and
Mm.
I'm going to try to make this paint and this painting into that. It seems more like you're acknowledging equilibrium and like or equal sense or lack of sense of control. If it's like I'm going to try this and see what happens and we'll talk about it. you know
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the best approach has been somewhat the balance between those two things.
Mm.
There's of course a level of planning that goes into it, but also when you get rid of the uh, when you get rid of leaving thanks to the materiality of paint and chance, then you lose something there too.
Mm.
So that's definitely the case.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And
Yeah.
I was also, it's interesting that you guys say that because um in one of the artist breakdowns I did for the Meta crew, I was talking about the concept or like the notion of work pretending or attempting to be something instead of actually being the thing, right? And the best example I could think of that would put it out like in the open as understandable is one time Andrew Morrow in fourth year, he was like, guys, let's do an exercise. Do your worst abstract painting. Like well, not no, don't do your worst abstract painting, but I want you to actively create the worst piece of art you can in 20 minutes.
I saw those. It was
You saw
excellent.
those, dude, right? And it's like, and so the funniest thing that he said to me is like, it's like your abstract work is attempting to be bad, but it's not bad, you know. And that was when something clicked in my head because he was like, it's not good abstract, and I was like, yeah, of course it's bad. 20 minutes, I just like fucking punched shit on the fucking. Um, it was one of those wood boards that we actually used to not get paint on the easels, I think. And he was like, don't use it, and I just used it. Um, but he was like, yeah, it's attempting to be bad work. And I was like, ah. So sometimes, when you actively go thinking, I need to make a socio-political work, you get too focused on the aspect of what makes it socio-political that you neglect
Mhm.
everything else, and then it doesn't connect with the viewer at all, and
Yeah.
it becomes super shallow, and even you, the viewer, the art critique, and my grandma, can tell.
That really
Yeah.
puts it into perspective. I think what you just said, is it work that is attempting to be good or bad, or is it work that is actually good or bad? And
Mhm.
maybe the process of getting to the point of good or bad is, yeah, but there are so
There's
many different
Oh,
processes of doing
absolutely.
the
oh, there's
good
something
work
there's
that it's.
something just really like funny about even like good or bad, like the binary
Mm.
bullshit of like being boxed in and like thinking that we have any control over like, you know,
Well, that
a
was
lot of things.
that was gonna, yeah. It's also good that you say that because that was gonna lead me to my next point that you know even those like bad, what you classify like you said is like that binary term of bad work, it still teaches you a lot, right? And like
Yeah.
Yekta said, through studies, and I've noticed at least, um, because because of the project that I just finished over on foundation, I realized after I finished it that the month before that I spent doing random photo studies on Photoshop is sort of what pushed me down that project unknowingly, right? And it's like, and then like Yekta says, where it's like you add the socio-political meaning after. That's what happened with my work. I was like, cool, I'm liking these studies. What if I add it to this program? And then what if I add it to this program? And then once everything clicked, I was like, oh, cool. What if I start using, ancient Egyptian models? Right? And in that sense, it was like everything, like the exploration happened, and then I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm just doing 10 photo studies a day, like just fucking around. And
Yeah.
then a month later, boom, I have an idea that's sort of executable, Um, and so,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's
mm,
right. Like it's also just like not boxing yourself in, right? Like
exactly.
it's really important. Like we were talking about with like having a place that you can literally like you can't be precious about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, like that's a big thing they try to teach us is like kill your darlings, break don't be afraid of breaking the part of the painting that
Oh,
you
absolutely.
know,
Well,
right?
it's really good that you say breaking apart the painting because there is an artist who joined the NFT space who burns his paintings. He's a really nice figurative painter. Insane. Like his skill is wild as hell. In one of his videos, he takes a torch to the face of one of his figures, and I was like, man, you're fucking mad, bro.
That reminds me of Rihanna shooting cell phones in like several of her music videos. Just
Wait,
exactly.
what?
Oh man, it's for another day. That's just a perfect like internet rabbit hole. Rihanna destroying cell phones.
Rihanna? Okay, I'm gonna go
The
down that
best.
rabbit hole. I went down the weirdest rabbit hole yesterday. It was like I found this random YouTube channel that was like half the hip hop artists are dead and have been replaced, and I was like, oh boy, we've gone too far. you know, I was just looking at lyrical interpretations, sir. I was trying to find bars. um, so Last time we had talked, Kimberly, I had at least we had just sort of talked about our show being about identity and stuff. Um, and last week I had asked Yekta what themes he's tackling, and then or like sort of what he's thinking of the work that he's producing now for the show is going to be, and he talked about the painting. But for you, like, what do you? How is like how are the thought process? How are the processes going for the show, like for the work that you're making?
Like with regards to the I don't want to say prompt, but like with regards to the whole like center of this being identity,
Mm.
um, I think that it's funny because it's still very much in like the same vein as what we talk about when like I think just in a personal kind of like way, my like the fact that I've been working in healthcare for,
Mm.
you know, like half of the time because I work a little bit less. I work part time when I'm in school, and being in summer, I'm able to pick up more, and um, and just kind of focus on that part of my life, which is really science based and analytical, and systemic kindness, and it's really working in healthcare, and even if we're in Canada and everything, like having a good healthcare system, I still work in like a component of a business in a really weird way that sometimes bothers me, but
Mm.
and it's sometimes a really hard job, and it can be really like rewarding all the same, and like you get to help people and they're most vulnerable and all that. But I really think that there's something like um, that about the analytical comfort that
Mm.
comes with like I there's a policy and a procedure of steps here that like I know like 1 plus 2 equals 3, like that kind of thinking is really like I know how to do an IV insertion from A to D on a
Damn.
step, like on a chronological step, and like a lot of things in healthcare actually come up, like a lot of innovation in healthcare has come up from misstep or a mistake. Like we don't put certain IV bags next to other IV bags because they look too similar,
Mm.
but they contain different things. And you have to factor in the reason that we don't keep them next to each other is because of human error.
Mm.
And I think that that's that kind of thing like comes up a lot in technology as well. Like you know it's I think it's the Toyota model where they changed debit card machines because people would punch in their pin, they'd take out their cash, but the debit card would come out after the cash,
Mm.
so people would leave their debit card in the machine and then like
Oh
the next
yeah.
person, right? So that problem, that thing coming up as like dangerous and people being probably stolen from, came up as an issue, and that's how it was fixed. And what they
Mm.
did instead was debit card comes out first and
And
then you
then
get your money.
mm.
And I think like I think with that kind of thinking, that's something that's brought up in healthcare a lot. Like we have to think about what we're doing first
Mm.
and like what the result is. And I'm still thinking about things in like an objective subjective way. In
Mm.
painting, I'm trying to figure out like how exactly to depict that in a way through paint and through like personal themes of experience.
Mm.
And I've been thinking lately, because I'm also interested in like identity as like like a Canada problem, like the
Mm.
Canadian identity problem. And I've been reading a lot of Northrop Frye, or um yeah, and like just trying to put these things together. But I've been thinking lately about like the image of the nurse, and
Oh.
you know if I should like shift or lean into that, or if that's just like because that's a canonical image that's gone through variations in history. And
Mm.
you have the mother, you have the slutty nurse, you have the heroine, the hero nurse,
Mm.
and you have like all these variations and of this image. And I think it's really interesting because sometimes images don't change like that. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't know, it's something I might lean into and see, but I'm still trying to figure out what exactly or how exactly to
Yo.
put together why objective thought is like a huge obsession with Westernism and how that plays into our identity and whether that's good or bad.
Yo, yo, you can't just drop bombs on us like this, okay,
Yo,
bro?
I can't, like, I'm sorry I talk for so long because
Bro,
I'm literally trying to figure out what the fuck I'm even trying to
yo,
do.
but you can't just drop like nice, like, bro. What? Why? Wait, hold. I gotta pause. Give me a second.
If you get whatever I'm saying, if anything comes up for you that feels like it's a tangible image, tell me because I'm looking at a wall of images right now
Um,
and I'm like,
I mean, just like the nurse, like that, just the idea of depicting a nurse or like talking about how nurses are depicted. Like, I actually never thought about
Mhm.
it in an artistic way before. Every every way I've looked at it is in sort of the patriotic nurse sort of lens that you just hear about in school. You know, nurses are like doctors. You know, they serve their people, and it's it's like in the same sense where you put a cook in a painting and you look at them in a completely different light. Like, I've never actually looked at a nurse in a contemporary
Yeah,
painting setting at
but
all.
yeah, if you even if you just Google the word chef, you'll see like the like honestly stereotypical like Italian like tall hat, you know,
Yeah,
like mustache, bit of a belly, like you know, little apron on, like you'll for some reason wearing all white, like,
yeah,
and same with the nurse, like
yeah. Like,
they're the image of like a woman in a skirt with a little bonnet thing in her hair, like, and that's just not how that is, you
yeah,
know, like it's
it
interesting and it does and that kind of thing does something, so I don't know exactly why we want that kind of control over that, and I think it's important because it gives people comfort and people have expectations or whatever, of
it's
course, but it's at the fundamental of my job, trust is like a really important thing, and like, you know, you shouldn't not trust somebody if
mm,
they don't have like a bonnet in their hair and they're not like a perfect looking white woman or something who's like also going to be your mother for, you know, the 8 hours that she's at work. It's you know, it's just, and I just don't think that's how it is, so it's, and how those images change in history and recruiting people to become nurses is a big thing for the next,
mm,
you know, however long because of the past year. So
it's
yeah, it's
yo.
yeah, I don't know. It's also like, do I need to like use that part of my life and make art about it? I don't know.
I mean,
I'm
well,
thinking
that is a
maybe
really that is a
you
really
go.
also. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, no, I was just saying. I was maybe I'll see what happens if I practice that.
That's it's well, it's really good that you actually. It's funny. Sorry that you brought that up because I don't know if you remember or Selena Jeffrey ever brought up the work of I think give me one second. I'm gonna find it. And it's the man's that snuck into a morgue and took
Oh yeah,
pictures.
yeah,
Andres Serrano, right? And
yeah. Oh yeah, I definitely talked in that class.
yeah, it's also it would actually be it it's it would also be interesting to see art that deals with the
Well,
ethics and
there
morals.
was a lot of there's a lot of ethical issues. There was
Oh
a
yeah.
nurse. There was a nurse
Wait.
in I want
Mm-hmm.
to say like Saskatchewan or something. It was further west in Canada, maybe Calgary. She she was complaining on Facebook, and she's a nurse, and she had an elderly parent. And she was complaining on Facebook, like, you know, like boomers do, about like the way that her family member was being treated at their long-term care home. And
Mm-hmm.
she, you know, she didn't name names, she didn't say specifics, she just, you know, complained about something general. And I remember like there was an example of the post in this story because she ended up being delicensed
Oh wow.
from like the College of Nurses of wherever she was, because we pay a licensing fee and we, you know, we have an ethical standard. We I took the jurisprudence test
Mm-hmm.
as part of my licenseship, and you know, like it's important, like it's crucial important, but the fact that she like just was complaining about the quality of care, and that was taken and was seen as a slight against the profession at large.
Mm-hmm.
So she's still going through like fighting for her like license, fighting for her job, like, and somehow, and I think she was fined like $20,000 or something just for
Jeez.
writing on Facebook. So, and like again, like I remember seeing the post. I don't believe that there was anything that was really like naming names or really defaming anything about the job. She was just probably frustrated and probably venting. And I've seen worse from like, you know, anybody about their own job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's and there's so many issues with like the support and finances that long-term care's
Mm-hmm.
facilities even have. So if maybe she's acknowledging that the quality of care was not good, wouldn't that be more about asking for more help than it would be asking
Mm-hmm.
for her to be punished for that? I don't know. It was there is an ethical part to like, if I make art about this, like I still work in this healthcare field, so like how that comes across. So and it's just more interesting to me because I'm not going to put a lot of stock into doing studies about it. I just want to see how it feels,
Mm.
and see if that's like something that feels important. And maybe like having the audience being both artists as well as healthcare people will do something for me
I,
that kind of feels less oppositional than sometimes I feel in my two different
and
arts.
and I think I also think what's really interesting is sort of what's happening all with the what like what you just said, and like the sort of questions that you're having are sort of similar to the same questions me and YEKTA are having within our own works about identity. Maybe not the ethics of it because we don't work in the healthcare department, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No,
but
that's fair.
but
No,
the
there's, I think, still a huge
there.
like
Like
the
identity
the
politics.
Mm,
themes, yeah,
mm,
that are present in our work are also about the ethical.
exact. And
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
what I think is really interesting is also um I realized this very early on in the space. Artists are not aware of the history they're making and the active part they take in history, you know?
Mm.
So, you know, it's like when you think about it is like what's the best example? Like for example, like the work of
Agnes Martin.
huh?
I think Agnes Martin's work is like, you know,
Agnes.
because she was incredibly dedicated. Just to circle back on what Yekta was saying, with like just continuing, like,
Mhm.
and you know, like dedicating to what you're doing, to learning, to seeing.
It's
Um, yeah.
it's
That's what I was just actually I was just gonna say, because I didn't speak for her, I guess I didn't say anything about all that you just talked
That's okay.
about, and I
Yes.
really feel like I think doing what you're asking,
Mhm.
whether if you should do this or explore these themes in your painting practice, I think doing them can really just maybe answer those questions,
Right.
because yeah,
ex-
exactly, instead
Isn't
of
that funny?
yeah, maybe thinking,
exactly.
oh, when I put this into my work, when I use this imagery, when I explore certain themes, what is that gonna do, how
Hmm.
is it
It's
gonna be perceived?
mhm.
Yeah, maybe instead of thinking about them, as soon as you do, you get an idea and things start just happening.
Hmm.
It gets the ball rolling, I guess.
It's
And
Yeah.
it's that, and also like in the sense of like, you know, Yekta, like after I look at your work I can never treat any of the fabric patterns on a rug as just patterns, right?
No, me neither.
Every rug
you what? Sorry.
ever since looking at your work, I can never look at a rug pattern as a rug pattern.
Oh,
I still see figures, you know, I because
yeah.
you took the image and you've now in my head you've modernized it into figures, and so now my brain is
It comes
faced.
up.
Mm,
It
Well,
comes.
the funny thing is, my first experience with the visual language that's on those rugs
mm,
was,
Hmm.
of course, it was when I was very young, because you have them everywhere. Like, you're in
mm.
Turkey, in the Middle East, almost
Every
every
house.
family, yeah,
Yep.
every household has one of those rugs. They're from different regions, but
Hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
I would sit down. Well, I was like 4 or 5 years old. I would sit down, and to me, have you guys ever seen that video of Bjork talk about the back of is it a TV or a computer?
I
It's the chip. It's not
Oh yeah, yeah. The hard drive.
it's the hard drive or the
Yeah.
motherboard or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she talks about it as if it's a like city. They're
mm,
like little people living in there. She's talking
Yeah.
about the cables as if
mm,
they're roads, and they're like elevators that And to me, it was something like that. I would sit down and I would just like examine, and to me, there was like a almost life going on in there. There was just everything. There was this universe in there
Yeah.
that someone had put all this information, and I was just like interpreting it. And to me, it was like a language. Well, it is a language. It is a visual language. And now, when I go back and do research, that is the case. All those uh, you said that I modernized and made them into figures, but apparently they work. They are figures.
They,
They all have connotations and meanings. They are all their own symbols. So that was very interesting to me. It is just this whole, you
That
know, this obscured language of, and it's mainly women who made the rugs, a craft or art that we do not consider to be, you know, art or fine art, but there's also so much, like hours and hours of work. But not only that, there is this built-in coded language, which is just, it is so interesting.
I
and it,
think I think about rugs now because like I like you and I chatted because I bought a kilim and like we got it from this exactly like a mother daughter business in Pakistan, um, and
nice.
like yeah, and it was like we just chatted about it in passing YEKTA because you're like, oh, like is that it? And I was like, yeah. You're like, oh, it's nice, like just a casual little chat on Instagram about it. But when I think about them now, like after getting to know you more and to know your work more and to know like the history because of like by extension of what you're doing and what you talk about, it reminds me of how important that kind of cultural aspect is, as well as for your own personal like identity with like diasporic kind of like living here, but like knowing that kind of upbringing. And that kind of crosses into my interest of like Canadian identity question marks, like and I think that's come up a lot, like unspecifically in writing about Canadian identity. It's come up like like I said, Northrop Frye has written about it as like the Canadian identity problem, and there's lots of Canadian literary critics who who write about it, or there's like poetry that reflects it, and essentially like that corner of Canadian arts has been kind of talking about that for some time. And whenever I found that, I was like, wow, that's how I feel about it. And like I'm just a third generation one, but I feel like that loss of like language and culture because my family like and like how can I feel a loss when I never really knew about it? But I think about it as an extension of like how much like we do bring other cultures here, and like we we're Canada, we're the we perpetuate that whole image of a um like pieces of glass put together. What's that called?
I actually
um
don't know.
you know what I mean? We're not a melting pot. We're the other thing. Not a mural, but like we are a bunch of pieces woven together. Like
Like a
rather
stew?
than
I don't know.
like
Sorry.
sorry, what?
A stew? I was making stew this morning.
Not a collage, but we're one of those. Like we
Bead
don't.
beaded. Oh,
It'll come to me later, and I'll just like yell it out. But yeah, like we keep every piece together, like to make it into a whole instead of melting down and assimilating, even though that's just an image. Like we all know that assimilation was like a massive part of Canadian culture. So like I'm interested in like the how much that kind of part of your work is reflective of like identity in a personal way as well as like a cultural way. um and how that I'm curious how you feel that comes up for you being like here in like would you consider that diaspora like a person from somewhere else living in a different country?
yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely think so. Yes, and also I I feel like the rug motifs, that visual language has it was it's something I've always been I found visually interesting, but now that I've incorporated it into my practice, I almost there's this there's almost this connection between me and back home and my
Mm-hmm.
culture, and
Mm-hmm.
it somewhat brings me joy in a sense. It is odd. It is.
I think that
Uh,
makes sense.
yeah,
Like it's
there is
something that pulls
something
you
in
from the
my,
start.
there's this, yeah, touch of, there's that touch, mostly in the paintings. There's that, the touch. There's a motif somewhere
Mm.
in the paintings that are on the rugs, that they're kind of like in your face. It is a rug, but yeah, it has, and it's also, um
Well.
I think this recent painting I'm working on somewhat could be interpreted that way. When
Mm-hmm.
you guys get to see it, maybe you'll read it that way too. But I found that there was also a bit of survivor's guilt in
Mm-hmm.
me, because
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, it's, there's so
Mm-hmm.
many people who are in me or your positions, and there's so many who would die, give everything they have to be in this position.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Just being able to, seek life in a more stable and secure country.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's that aspect of it too. But
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
well, it's to me, it's really interesting, um, that you guys talk about that, because I had taken, what is it, sociology of the family class. It was a weird
Oh
class
yeah.
that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
took at U Ottawa, and um, like yeah, like Yekta, the way I treat your work is, you're evolving Turkish art. Whether you believe it or not. I personally believe it. In the sense of, like I said before, artists don't realize they're evolving, but the stuff that you're doing, the way I look at it, is foundational to how art evolves. You know, to me, it's like I look at it and I'm like, man, like, holy fuck, like you looked at these things that everybody in the Middle East as a kid has enjoyed as a child, because like you said, looking at these rugs, I used to do the same thing as a kid. Um,
Mhm.
given some of our Egyptian carpets had more like figures on them and camels and stuff, I
Yeah.
still I still did the same thing, right? And so, looking at your work, my brain is like, yeah, of course this is the next fucking step. It's like, shit. How did I not think of this before? It's like we have, like, and it also comes to everybody. It's like we all have these cultures that are so visual, right? And um they have a structure, but they're also so visual that we forget us working and evolving that is sort of laying the foundations for other work, because it hasn't happened before. And then, Kimberly, to you, I ask you, like, have you ever thought about your work as actively creating what it means to be sort of Canadian, in a sense, because you refer to yourself as, as a third generation. Is that the correct term? I don't.
Yeah, well, like exactly, right? Like, is that the correct term? I like
Mhm.
because, right? Like, and like that, I just,
But like,
I don't know.
yeah, but like, do you think maybe, like, just a hypothetical, that through you exploring that said work, you're actively,
Mm-hmm.
because I think, and I believe it, right? Because I think, your work alongside the work of artists like Lorna is actively creating what
Oh,
it
Lauren's
means
work
to
is just
be.
so wonderful.
It is, but it's like your work is really nice in the same light, because you guys are talking about these subjects that you can say, like, some of them you've never experienced, but also that's sort of going to be the experience for a bunch of generations of Canada, until, you know at least from what I learned from my social and family classes, until, full Canadian culture, like extreme, like 200, or 1,000 year culture is established, you know because we can all look at, Middle Eastern culture and be like, they have theirs, but it's been years, and it's taken centuries for those little, specific elements to become evident as, cultural Middle Eastern elements. And so, like, have you ever thought about your work, like, maybe, like, yo, like, yes, I'm having these problems, but through me tackling these problems, I'm helping solidify what it means to be, a person who was born in Canada, tackling or what it even means to be Canadian, to create Canadian art.
I I mean, like it kind of circles back to kind of what we were talking about with the whole putting yourself in a socio-political box. But then
Mm.
I find myself like in this weird double-edged sword of like, do we even like, I think that us breaking boxes is really
Mm.
important, like just us, like as a like like in general
Mm.
humans, like people in like in any like capacity, um like in any critical institution, like that's incredibly important. And it's like, to circle back, like it just feels like if I'm focused too much on what the socio-political aspect of something that I'm trying to put down is, then I feel like I'm almost using it
Mm.
in a way that's like inappropriate. It seems evil to to try to, and I don't mean evil because, like, I have a certain,
Mm.
like, I have a certain, like, I'm a person in the world, and like I have a certain amount of privilege, and that it's important to me that if I can acknowledge something, that if I can, and of course, like within my art career as well as my job, like it's important for me to stand up for people who have been systemically oppressed
Mm.
in any critical institution that I participate in.
Mm.
So I, like, that's just, that's not going to be limited to one area or another of my life. That's as simple as, if I'm walking down the street, that's
Mm.
important to me, and I, witness firsthand something that shouldn't be happening. Like, that's, I think that that's kind of like a practice of like that. So with that said,
Mm.
I don't want to use like things inappropriately, or box them in, but I do think that, like, it's important for me to think about how this fits into such such a thing as like Canadian history,
Mm.
or whether or not it, I don't want to think about it in a way that feels competitive, like as if like, or arrogant, if that makes sense. Like, I
Mm.
don't want to think like, I don't want to be too like, my work is a part of that. But I do want to focus in the same way that YEKTA feels connected to culture through,
Mm.
and like, and also himself, like as a child, even like thinking about like those moments and what pulled you to a rug, you know what I mean, like that's still like incredibly important. And I
Mm.
do feel that way about, I try to focus on that feeling if I'm looking at something, whether if that's like a technique of like a painting that I admire, or even the story behind the painting, or even just an image that evokes something personal, or otherwise for me, like something that brings me back to myself and my values, and also acknowledges the larger picture of like how I fit into something like Canadian identity, with regards to the very um, like uninspired past of industrial mercantile fucking Canada.
But like
So
but that's
yeah,
the thing,
I
you
do
know.
want to think about my work, a part of it, but I don't, yeah, I don't want to just keep making art that doesn't
Mm.
acknowledge the history of Canada, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense because like, well, because that was the thing that surprised me, in art history classes, was at least like the one thing is, you know, like my biggest thing at least in art history classes was it's fine to recognize the past, absolutely, 110%, right? But also recognize where you are in common day, like modern times, right? Because at some point, like
Mm-hmm.
the biggest thing that was a shocker to me is, how many artists didn't realize, that this
Mm-hmm.
is we're still so early on what it means to be what it means to have Canadian art, because
Mm-hmm.
if you go to any Canadian art class, it's all landscapes, Emily Carr, nature, native, some form of native
Yeah.
art,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't go beyond that, and then people be like, yeah, we need to diversify it, right? But the way I looked at it is, I'm like, that also, that there's a diversification, um, will
Mm-hmm.
come naturally over a few more years. You can try to force it as much as you want, but you know like Yekta was saying earlier, it's like you can't, if you're going in actively saying this is going to be a political Canadian identity work, I want to make a political Canadian identity work, um, you can't guarantee that it might become that, because in our last
Of course.
in the artist talk with the Yekta, we had like brought up like the idea of, propagandistic work, and how even
Mm-hmm.
the work that's least propagandistic, that's been created with no propaganda in mind, can sometimes become the most influential propagandistic work ever. you know.
Right.
And so it was weird to me to see, like, it's like to hear people talk about Canadian history and Canadian art history as if it's been established, fully established, and not see
Mm-hmm.
that the foundations are still being laid down by every art student attending the class, and who has finished classes, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder, it makes you wonder, like, what, because exactly like in history class, you hear like this was what was being explored, but it's just like, of course, like that seems like such a narrow thing
Mm-hmm.
to say was happening, and that was all that it was, and anything else that was happening was like almost not recognized in the canon, which they would say that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's just like based on a set of standards of common themes that then were like categorized or cataloged even, and like we recognize as minimalism or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And that like artists having like autonomy over being like, actually no, that's not what I was doing. Like Agnes Martin said that, she's like, oh no, that's like, I'm not a minimalist, like, and I say so. Just because, like, just because my work has like certain themes that
Mm-hmm.
seem to jive in that category, like, you know that's an interesting part of identity too, like
Mm-hmm.
how much autonomy you have over what it is that you're doing,
Well,
what it is that you're making, and
That I
that's
was
an
like,
interesting dance for sure.
I was gonna say something very similar. I think regardless of your intention,
mm-hmm.
uh, we all are contributing and adding
Mm-hmm.
to the Canadian socio-political sphere
Mm-hmm.
and economy and everything, because we're just living and making and
Exactly.
working and eating and making choices here. So yeah,
Exactly.
it is also that definitely at times not that autonomous, I guess, because
Yeah, we're working with what we got.
Yep.
yeah.
And
Kind
and
of.
and yeah, and it's people forget inspiration can, like, one person who's not Canadian can influence all of Canada.
Yeah,
More.
and its degree is not that, I guess, important,
Yeah,
really.
and it's like, I mean, like, in the sense, like, you have Mobius, right? Insane French artist, and his work has influenced every comic book industry worldwide completely. It's like you go to an artist in Japan. Do you know Mobius? Yes, I know Mobius. Damn, bro, what? You go to America. Do you know Mobius? They literally they took heavy metal from France and made it into America, just based off how good he was, right? So it's like inspiration can come and influence from any place, also. Um, but also, I have now that you guys brought up the topic of artists classifying their work as minimalism, and like some people, and like arguing of what you classify work as, right? Now that we have entered a
Mm-hmm.
space, right, where you can actually create a page for your art movement, a store, like, right? I say this because we have this artist in the space called Robness. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. He is the creator of the trash art movement, right? My thought, like, I wholeheartedly believe that this is a valid art movement. It's the guy has gone through efforts, and one of the things I'm going to tell you guys about, because I think it's actually fascinating, right? Because we can sit and debate, and I've had one of those debates with one of our professors, like, one of the art history professors at U Ottawa, and it's like you can sit and debate, for example, if some of the neo-German expressionist works are actually expressionist, or do they fit that? But then what happens when you create something as the trash art movement, right? Or like, say you're coming up with, like, the trash expressionist movement, for example, and then you invite people, right, who want to be trash expressionists, right, to mint and create work under that page, so that it no longer becomes debatable if it's trash expressionist or not. How do, like, isn't it? What do you guys think about that?
Mm.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, Yekta. Yeah.
what was I need to?
I
I'll
I'll,
need you to repeat the question. Uh, what is
so
it that you're
so essentially,
asking?
like, yeah, no, I realized I went on a little bit of a weird loop there. So essentially, like, right, imagine if back then, or right, you could apply to become a neo-German expressionist, right? And you get
I
a,
mean,
and well, like, but like, instead of like, well, more than apply, but like, you can actually get a
you would get
card.
invited, I think.
Mm,
Yeah, you get invited from the group of artists
well,
who established this,
yeah,
let's say, movement.
but
I
then,
feel like not that they had any uh not that they were this. I'm looking for the word. Uh,
Inventors.
Authority.
Yeah,
Yeah,
No,
not
no.
somebody.
that
Yeah.
they were the inventors or they were just a group of people who were doing things similarly,
Mm.
which they believed to be good. Not that it was them who kind of
But
invented it or came
mm.
up with it. So I,
But essentially, like, what if, right, after you get invited to this group, right, you get a little, like, seal thing, or, like, some sort of thing that you would then put on your
Like a
artwork.
guild.
Yeah,
mhm.
that would
Yeah.
then infinitely, right, with no question or debate, be like, yes, this was produced as a Neo German Expressionist work. There is the Neo German Expressionist
Mm.
seal, right? Because that's sort of what happened in the NFT space as of late, right? Because then, like this art Robin is, he was like, if anybody wants to produce under the trash art movement, send me your wallet and I'll invite you to the OpenSea collection. And so there's like 100 of us
Okay. I
collaborating
mean,
on the OpenSea collection, right? But the interesting thing to me was like, holy fuck, you know, like if I can classify, like the way, like the official way of like classification has now completely changed to where I can now be like, yeah, trash art, I am part of it,
okay.
you know?
Um, See, what I think
Mm.
is, of course, the collaboration and the community aspect of is great, but I also think it is. I much prefer that, and we don't really have it in the contemporary art world anymore.
Mm.
We don't have those group labels.
The
I
guilds.
think that's much, yeah, I think that is much more beneficial both for the art world and the artists because they're
Mm.
able to be much more. I was just looking at the word of Wangechi Mutu, who's
Ooh.
she's a sculpture, collage, watercolor. You know, she's all over the place, and uh, there's so many contemporary artists like that. You know,
Mm.
some make digital work, they make digital work, they make paintings, they make sculpture, they make miniature, whatever. And you could classify,
Mm.
if we were to go back 50 years, you could classify all those different works in different art movements and
Mm.
groups and associate them with all of that. But what that does to both, I think, artists and periods is that we were talking about this idea of boxes. You know,
Mm.
it really restrains the
Yeah.
artwork and the artist and the period. And it's just this
Mm.
one name, Cubism. Well, German expressionism,
Mm.
and Fauvism. We don't have that anymore. I think that's just much more beneficial
Mm.
because then people get boxed in to these things they might not belong to. I mean, you know, it's that's how I feel about it. You know, when you call something
Yeah.
trash art movement,
Mm.
I mean, it's great that people come together under a certain subject that they're interested in. That's of course great, but you know, I don't know, names and
I mean,
titles are a bit. When you tell me about trash art or trash expressionism, I immediately think of Robert Rauschenberg. I
hey,
think Robert
listen,
Rauschenberg is definitely the
actually, so
trash artist.
funny enough, I'll send you a few links after this about the trash art movement because Duchamp has made his way into Duchamp's inspiration for the Dada is like the birthplace for this whole movement. It's actually hilarious. But the thing that interested me is, like you said, right, and it's one thing you noted on that my ear picked up on is, you know, people classifying others' work as, you know, we would classify the artists, like the artist you mentioned's work as miniatures, for example. And the thing that why I brought that up is because, you know, in art history classes, you know, labels and boxes and like these binary options that we place on artists, we tackle them from the outside, right? And the biggest thing that we also see in the evolving now is people reclaiming those um, boxes that have been placed on them, or, you know, deciding that this ain't my box, bro, I'm gonna make my own box, you know. And so I to me, like, this is a different opposing point of view from Yekta, but like the way I looked at it is it's like it might not be good to have, you know, labels on everything, but for example, if I wanted to make an artwork as a, like as I Anubis 3100, right, who wanted to make an artwork that was undeniably expressionist, for example, or like trash expressionist, right, I have the power to actively go right and produce it under the trash expressionist name, and nobody else can debate me. No art history dude can be like, no, you know what, but I think it could fit there. you know, because I've already. Does that make sense? That was my thinking of it. Um, I just thought it would be cool to talk about because
But when you, here's the thing: when
Mm.
you put together a group of people like that, aren't you also doing somewhat the same thing of creating these labels of, so what is trash I mean, that's I guess to me is there a need for it really?
Well-
That's what my point is. It's not that it's a bad thing that there's this trash art movement that I don't know anything about it yet anyways. I'm like, is there really a need for people to, oh, I am this movement and this solidifies me as
Oh man,
something in
that would be
history?
like, that would be like
Um,
saying I'm the deer painter.
well,
Like,
but no, but, like,
that's me.
yeah,
Like,
or I am the rug painter.
no,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
You know, it's
like, right,
and
but
I think, you know why I find it so negative? Because as soon as as soon as Kimberly is the deer painter, and as soon as I am the rug painter, there's nothing else. People are just going to be like, oh, he is the rug painter. Okay, well, we boxed him. That's what he is, and that's what he's going to do from now on. It is so. It
Limbing.
just. They're like shackles, you know?
Yeah.
I, I get your point. I really do. It's like the way, because it's like we're both coming at it from like two opposite things, like completely opposite points of view. Because the way I see it, I'm like, yeah, you know what? If I want to classify this as my thing, you know, like.
No, I get it.
Right?
Like,
No.
you're focused on the radical kind of the radical potential of the NFT space in terms of like you
It's
can go to this area and put your stuff there, and
Well-
if it fits, you'll know.
Well,
Like that's comforting in an interesting way. All the same, it's the same thing. Like
it's not. It's a little bit, to me, like the way I looked at it. It's a little bit more than that in the sense of like we now have the classification power over ourselves rather than
yes,
museums.
that's what I mean. Yeah,
You know,
that's what you're saying.
that's
Yeah.
what. And so, is it good? Like, do I agree that we should classify everything? Like, no. But I think it's nice that this evolution of power has evolved to now where it's like, the artists are the ones classifying themselves instead of the institutions classifying us. You know, is that going to be a good thing in the future? I don't know.
Yeah,
this-
we talked about this a little bit, like the like Sobeys joining, you
The
know,
NFTs.
right? Like, so that was the kind of thing. Like, if this has been like a very long-standing institution of it within the art realm, joining this space that was basically to subvert its entire, you know what I mean, like that entire realm, and
Yeah.
like the institutional parts of it, like we kind of chimed in about that. Like I couldn't, I'm not educated enough to have a fully formed opinion about that, but I do think that it's an interesting, probably important conversation where like, right, like where as long as we're going to keep categorizing things and putting things into boxes, now having like the giving more value into, not even more value, but giving like continually like having like kind of the abject areas where art inspires like the mainstream. You'll watch, like it just, it's like follow the dots basically is what happens between those two things. And that was a really interesting part of something I noticed with NFTs is just like that was a controversial moment when Sobeys was like, oh hey, yeah, we're just gonna come in here.
I have a more controversial moment for you.
Go off.
Right? Get ready for this. Damien Hirst is in the fucking space.
Oh no shit. He's got like 17 interns who were
Right?
like 22 years old.
Oh, I heard what he was selling both the
Guess what?
physical copies and the NFTs.
But
and
guess-
giving people the choice between.
Guess which project he started with? His fucking dots, bro.
His dots.
His dots, man. I
Oh
lit-
wow, did he call them pixels? Wow.
No, he called them dots, and then he was like, "We came up with this AI program that classifies all 3,000 paintings as like different classifications of rarity." And I was like, "Bro, shut the fuck up."
Oh,
Go-
that's
He's just
funny.
milking it. You know?
It's so to those listening to our recording, Damien Hirst is not a valid fine artist. He is the worst artist. His work has been highly critiqued to hell. I'm not even kidding you. I'm not even my dead grandma knows his work is shit. I'm not kidding.
You know, he used. I still think Damien Hirst has made at least
Bro,
one great work.
I mean, we're talking
he
about
has-
him, so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is.
listen. I agree. I really think a cow's head rotting for 1,000 years is a really nice piece. Anything other than that, bro, let me pay your assistants for their work instead of you. You
At
know?
least we agree on which piece was
Yeah.
the
Oh,
good
come
one.
on.
Yeah,
Hey, come on.
yeah. I was gonna
Come
say
on.
1,000 years too.
Come
Yeah.
on. Yeah, no, I thought that's actually like that's a really nice piece. But everything else,
Yeah.
like man, like my biggest thing is in the space. Like everybody's like, yeah, Damien Hirst has joined. I'm like, you're literally buying his assistant's work. He literally has a quote, that
Ooh,
goes,
let's talk about this.
mm,
So if his assistants are the one doing the work, and we've seen the pictures of them doing the production,
mm,
right? What's, like, where's the middle of the Venn diagram between that and a bunch of people choosing a style and then being like, I'm now this type of artist, and I know that because I am in the space that says I'm a trash artist because I work
wait, sorry,
with
could you?
trash. Like, in what, like, if there's people who are producing under basically the label Damien Hirst,
Mm,
like if somebody started the trash movement or whatever, and I don't know anything about it, so like, and then like
here.
you have to, that person was like, you have to send me an invite and then I'll let you work here, basically,
Uh,
or like show work here. I find that interesting, but like,
Mm,
that is funny
it sounds a
because
little bit similar in a way.
it is because
it, it's
I'm
really
gonna.
interesting that you say that. Actually,
It was one of my.
hmm.
Sorry.
Just a
No, no.
So it
little
was,
like thing that picked at my brain there for a
for
Damn.
second.
example,
Yo. Good.
German expressionism, when it comes to its painterly aspects and the way they did things visually, it's been one of the movements that I was really
Mm,
inspired by.
Hmm.
And what happened was, well, even if you painted just like the way the group did, just like the way they did, just like
Hmm.
Kirchner did, because he
mm,
was the leader of the group, right? Um, there were people who were invited to the group,
mm,
and there were people who got kicked out of the group,
mm.
not because of the way they painted, but because
Right.
things just did not work out, or
Mm.
they were like
Yeah,
not
they
seeing
weren't,
eye to
yeah,
eye politically, and
interpersonal problems,
and
yeah.
suddenly you were not a German expressionist
No,
anymore. So
that's
that there,
it's a really
it
good
is very funny.
it's a really good point that
Interesting.
you bring up because I noticed that exact same problem with the trash art movement. Like the space is so young that um, like well the way I joined it. So I posted a link in the live stream questions. Um, it's a little riff on Damien Hirst, but it's like I was making a joke, but because we were talking about like dots and what it means like to buy work from his assistants.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's an easy target. It's
yeah,
okay.
I know. Oh, absolutely. Hey, listen, he's the easiest target I'm gonna take, and
he's he's wealthy.
I hate his work. I
He's rich.
really
He's
do.
fine with this.
And it's like, I mean, like, my biggest thing with his work is like, legitimately, like, he literally said the best dot painting you could have is made by my assistant, and he said his name. To me, like, if you say that as an artist, you are no longer an artist. It's like, bro. So you mean the best dot painting by your assistant I could have is by her, not by you. Like it's in that sense. But also, like to Yekta's point, you know, it, it it is right. It's like I had to get invited, and people had to get invited to
Oh yeah,
become part of the trash art movement.
yeah.
The weird thing though, at least in the NFT space currently, right? And this is only in the NFT spaces, because it's all digital stuff that everybody can go in. Well, I actually don't know if I should say this. um, well, like there are two things here. One thing is I will just say that there is potential for extreme abuse from all parties participating in the all collaborators participating in the trash art movement. They just have to figure out how to get to it, but once it's there, it's literally like the potential for extreme abuse is already there, right? Because if you give everybody the keys to kick, if you give everybody the keys, everybody's got the keys. I'm not talking about like wallet keys. I'm just talking about like a keys to a door sort of thing. Just so like
Yeah,
people be
yeah,
like, I'm gonna go hunt for the trash art movement
yeah,
wallet key.
yep.
I'm like, no. Um, and so in the like the
Key to the city of trash.
yeah, and so and in the sense of like when I created like my assistant Damien Hirst, it's still created under my name. So in like the sense of people like when Yekta brought up the point, I sort of took it, and sort of like even art theft ideas. You'll get invited into groups, they'll take all your ideas and then kick you the fuck out, utilize your ideas, and then you're left in the dust, and they're in shows or whatever.
Ooh, yeah.
And a lot of times in cases like that, you haven't signed the work, or there is nothing concrete to tie your name to what's being produced, right? in the NFT space, like it still has like the tab is created, where it says it's created by Anubis 3100, but it's still there's extreme potential for abuse, and it's really good that it's a good thing to think about that I haven't thought about. Damn, goddamn, Yekta, Kimberly, I like y'all's brains. It's I actually didn't think because now that I think about
We
like
are asking some crazy questions.
it's true. Yeah, it's very true because it's like it's a question that needs to be asked. Like if we're gonna go down the same paths of other old art movements where we're classifying ourselves as art movements, you know, we gotta pay attention to the problems that they fell into and what made them invalid and inaccessible to where they died off now. Sort of. Um, Fine art history teachers would probably debate me because be like, we're in contemporary art. In 50 years, we're gonna get another art movement, and that's I don't know, but those are art history teachers, I guess. um, but yeah.
It's one thing that we were talking about earlier was yeah, or like when Yakta was saying something along the lines of like,
Mm,
if we, it's a little limiting to say like I am, like they are this person, this type of thing. We do kind of, I feel like we see like less of that right now because what
mm,
you can now in an interesting different way than it used to be of like going into a gallery and seeing who's there and like not having the ins and outs as to why
mm,
there's a like a tighter knit kind of community, not to sound like incredibly old, but like just because we have social media we can actually see
mm,
like in essentially like historical archival kind of networking of people interacting with each other and also ideas
mm,
and methods of making or not or whatever, like, and I think that's really interesting because we are like people, artists being
mm,
a part of galleries and shows, you get to a little synopsis and then you see all these different types of work
mm,
and how they're curated together, and I think it's less about the method or the style or the
mm,
like cult kind of following of a certain like regime of making, and it's more about like the idea and how they interpreted it. And I think like you see that in something like there's a lot of figurative painting
mm,
nowadays, and that's just an observation that someone who has been trained in like in trained in arts or is an
mm,
artist themselves has noticed, and like that observation is like very like nutritious, like it's like it's like
it
it
is.
feeds other people to
Oh,
have
absolutely.
like that kind of observation, and like that that plants something in somebody, and like
Mm,
like it did for me anyways. I was like, if I'm thinking about identity for like these conversations and the like duat art residency and like the show and everything that we're thinking about, then like looking to what's going on around you and
mm,
making observations and staying curious and like and comparing to the way that things have been or how you've been
mm,
taught, even like how things were, and staying curious and challenging those things or considering them in different ways is really like important. So
mm,
yeah, I think that there's like a lot of potential with that that has given me more than just like seeing something and thinking that it is a box or like just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean that it's a category.
mm.
It just means that something's happening there.
That's very true. No, it's very true. Um, you couldn't have said it perfectly. Um, yeah, I am in agreement 110%. Um,
Yeah, I don't know really like I like what art history people will say in the future
I mean,
about that. Like,
I,
I hope that it's something. I hope that it's something new, and I hope that it's something like, um,
as
yeah. I guess I hope that it's something more spiritual than categorical. Like, I hope that it. And I think that's an important part of
I
art is like that part of looking at art, right?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think you mentioning on like the future of art, like being spiritual and less categorical is, it's actually happening, and it's like it's weird. I don't like nobody knows how the future of this is of the art world is gonna play out, especially with identity and figuration. Because in university we got told fuck figures, fuck figuration. Figuration is at least some classes. But now there is something there, and a shift is happening in the public sphere towards that. Um,
Yeah.
and um, wait, hold on. I blanked out for a second. God damn it. Public sphere. Oh well.
Like the whole identity politics thing,
Mm.
which I think it kind of got brought up too earlier, like how that can be really limiting if
Oh, absolutely.
like for people, like for like especially now that we have social media and we can see what's going on in the world and we can see
Mm.
like the abuse that's been going on for like far too long in Palestine or what have you,
Mm.
and like it feels even limiting to fucking say the sentence what have you, like that's fucking terrible because it, things have gotten so flattened, but we can see it, and like what do we do with that? Like we're trying to make these things change and sway government, sway whatever corporations to
Mm.
stop having corporations, whatever. Like we're trying to do those things. So it's something I've noticed in like classes. If there's somebody who is like a visible um, individual, who isn't just like a white person making work. A lot of the time, like their work might have never been intended to be political, and it's being
Mm.
talked about like it is
Oh,
political,
absolutely. Oh,
and
absolutely.
it's interesting because it's just like like I feel like talking to the artist is more important than like commentary
Absolutely.
and like telling them what it is. Yeah.
And I mean, like,
So
it's weird to say this, It's like I like art history, I like art historians, but to me their insights have never really, at least when it comes to my own personal development of my own work, the insights of art historians have never really mattered, And I think future generations are starting to realize, like, man, this canon has been fucked and manipulated for so long that it's no longer. There are some elements that are no longer valid to listen to, and like this, and we're gonna get attention that's unwanted, unwarranted, and it's just like, I think, because like you
yeah.
said, it's hard for somebody who's an immigrant to make a work and not for it not to be politicized, even in the digital space. Because I'll actually end with this because it's funny. Um, I literally saw it happen in front of my eyes. Like the whole classic, hey guys, or like, like we heard about this in art history setting. Of like, how back then people would combine like 40 people from India and call it the Indian show, and immediately like classify every artist as gonna be tackling a topic about Indian identity, right? And you would go in there and you'd be like, wait a minute, like you already have a preconceived notion of what the work is about that has taken out the power from under 40 artists to be able to talk about what
Mm,
they truly want.
mm,
And it was weird to see like actually start to happen in the space where people are like, like, why don't we, like invite 40 people from India and have an Indian show? And I was like, boy, you have to be careful with how you tackle these, because you can essentially just put a whole sheet of Indian identity over 40 artists, and I guarantee you 25 of them will not be tackling Indian identity whatsoever. But now you've everybody's going in there expecting it to be tackling Indian identity, for example. Um,
yeah, it's like and it's really important like who's doing like that kind of blanket
mm,
speaking or gatekeeping, quote
exactly.
unquote, kind of too much of a buzzword, but like same with like what you said, like the art historians that we might have been exposed to, there may have been like other non-white voices that have just as much, if not more, that is like valid and important
Mm,
and perspective that like you know matters.
mm,
That just if it didn't have like an academic stamp on it of like having a PhD, it just didn't get
it's true.
the same recognition or validity, and that's just not correct, right?
Absolutely.
And we know that for sure.
Yes, and I would go to far as to say screw PhDs. They suck. I don't know.
I mean, I super love school,
Oh,
but I
okay,
get
no,
you.
that's
Like
that's the difference.
institutions
Yes.
are what they are. Yeah.
No, I only say that because in Egypt, like, you need a PhD. Everybody's like, oh, you got your degree, now you gotta get the PhD, and I'm like, nah, goodbye, no. Um, to those listening, thank you to our coming to our Duet residency talk number 4. Um, this was actually super fun, guys. We talked about so much that I did not expect us to talk about.
Yeah,
But
it
I
was
was like,
again great talking to both of you.
it's
Very happy to be here. Great to talk to you guys
and
both. I'm sorry I missed the last
no,
one,
it's fine. You
but I'm
you
here.
you out here saving people. You know, injecting them
Oh
with
God, don't
IVs, poking
don't
them.
be doing that. You put in the savior image on me right now.
I'm
We just
sorry.
talked about this.
Here, no, here. Okay, is like, is there an
Roulette.
evil nurse who pokes you with holes? There you go.
Don't be binary.
No, I'm sorry. Um,
And on that note,
yeah. To those
no,
listen,
for real, it's been really great to be here today.
yeah, it's super fun. And to those, if you have questions to Kimberly or Yekta, don't hesitate to add them in the Duat Residency channel text. We are all artists. We will literally talk to you about art if 24/7 if you get the chance. At least I will. So, yeah. I have left your Instagram links in the description for this one. I'll go back and add them to the other ones as well because I just realized there have been no Instagram links for the other talks. Um,
Thank you, Anubis.
yes, and also Kimberly, if you start minting any work, because I know Yekta has started minting his work.
I
Hit-
minted some more.
You minted some more.
Yay.
What the fuck?
Yay.
Sorry. Okay, the audio just went super loud in the video. But to those listening, if Kimberly also makes an OpenSea NFT thing, it will also be there. It will just automatically show up there because
Yes,
I hunt
I
for
am.
people's art.
Don't worry about it. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Just watch the space. I promise it'll be there soon.
All right.
Thank you again.
Have a good one, everybody. And